Hi, Gary Stearman. Time once again for another update from Prophecy in the News. And this is being recorded on the 8th of May for release on the 9th of May, which is a Wednesday. And I'm going to answer an email today. And this email comes to us from Nelson. And Nelson, thanks for your question. It is a very valid and legitimate question. I love getting emails, by the way, regardless of whether they are hypercritical or whether they are bouquets of roses or, as in this case from Nelson, it's a good question. He says, would you give me some insight into Daniel 2:43? I'm confused, he writes. It seems like there are three entities in this verse. While the verse speaks of iron and clay being mixed together, it appears to be referencing the iron and clay as one entity. And then it says that they, the iron and the clay, shall mix themselves with the seed of men, a third entity. Would you please explain what is meant by the seed of men? And let's go into this prophecy, which I think is one of the basic prophecies in all the Bible. And it has to do with the first prophecy in the Bible, which is in Genesis 3:15, of course, where the seed of the woman is spoken of as being the prophecy of the coming Redeemer. And of course, that seed of the woman resulted in the virgin birth of Christ through Mary. In Daniel chapter 2, Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream, and he says in Daniel 2:31, "Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces." Well, this is the generic statement of the statue, the multi-material statue that represents the flow of global power from the head of gold, which is Nebuchadnezzar, down to the 10 toes of iron and clay. And reading on, we read about the stone that was cut out without hands. Of course, that would be the Lord Jesus Christ coming to set up the kingdom and destroying the final great coalition of nations. Verse 35 says, "Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, the gold broken to pieces together, and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. The stone that smote the image became a great mountain, filled the whole earth." Of course, that great mountain is the kingdom. Now, the interpretation of this dream involves the verse that we have for our question today from Nelson. This is the dream, verse 36 of Daniel chapter 2. "And we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king," says Daniel. And he proceeds in Daniel chapter 2:38 to say to Nebuchadnezzar, "Thou art the head of gold." So Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the greatest monarch, or the beginning of Gentile monarchies, is the head of gold. And then in verse 39 he says, "And after thee shall arise another kingdom, inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, forasmuch as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise." And of course these kingdoms have been interpreted as starting with the head of gold, Babylon, then Medo-Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome. And of course Greece reached its apex with Alexander the Great, 323 BC. Then the Roman Empire came into its own with the rise of Caesar Augustus just before the birth of Christ. And so all of these empires proceed down through the ages. Now to skip down through this prophecy to verse 42. Coming to the 10 toes on the feet. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And Nelson writes, who is this mysterious they? Reading this again, verse 43, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay. Miry, it comes from a Hebrew root that means brittle or insubstantial. And the image here is that you cannot mix iron with brittle clay and expect anything strong to result. So when we come to the 10 toes, and then later on in Daniel 7, those 10 toes become 10 power divisions that attempt to set up a global control, but in fact collapse. Here the 10 toes are a kind of a preview of that situation. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. Here is a picture of two entities, the they being someone else attempting to mingle their genetic material with the genetic material of man. Now, you have been with Prophecy in the News long enough to know that we believe that back in Genesis chapter 6, we have a situation in which the fallen angels came down from heaven and attempted to infuse their genetic material into human genetic material, resulting in a damnable hybridization of the human race, out of which came Noah and his family, who were saved in the flood. Noah and his family were said to be perfect in their generations. The genetic manipulation of the fallen angels had not ruined their genome, and so they went to the other side of the flood, and humanity started all over again. But we read in many places in prophecy, and this is one of the most understandable, I think, that they, and I believe this they, Nelson, to be the fallen angels who come once again to attempt to mingle their genetic material with the genetic material of man. But they shall not cleave to one another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Of course, that's speaking of the millennial kingdom, headed by the Lord Jesus Christ, seated on the throne of David. Nelson, I have to tell you that we are entering into a period described by Jesus in the Olivet Discourse, in which he said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. And of course, in the days of Noah, there were fallen angels who attempted to corrupt humanity, resulting in all of the so-called myths of the giants of the old days. Those are not myths at all. They're kind of confused histories of the giants that came and tried to set themselves up as kings, and they fell. Well, they're apparently going to try to do it again in the days of the coming of the Son of Man, even as Jesus said. But Daniel says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. And so, to answer your question, Nelson, we are, I think, on the verge of another serious set of circumstances, such as plagued humanity in the days of Noah. Hope that helps to answer your question. And there is much, much more to be said, to be sure. Gary Stearman, hey, you keep watching. We're watching. And keep looking up, everybody.